Thank you for joining live this evening. So I'm going to be taking you through some material that talks about the epidemic of alcohol use and abuse today. But I'm going to be talking to you about the benefits of taking a break, what's good about taking a break, and what options are open to you if you choose to cut down on the drink or quit completely and choose sobriety, either for a period of time or sustainably in your life. So I'm Jill Mackay. I'm a sobriety coach with Inquisitive Coaching, and I now work with professional, successful women who want to break free from the hold of alcohol and start living a life of freedom and a life they don't want to escape from or drown out. So, as well as my coaching work, I also really want to help to open up the conversation about alcohol use because so many of us just don't talk about it. It's a really tricky subject. And of course, it can be really triggering for people. It can be tangled up with secrets and shame and some remorse and denial as well. So, my work is also about helping people understand alcohol's impact more so that we can make mindful choices for ourselves, for our families, our friends, and our colleagues, and support them if they're having some challenges around there. And I do that by posting regularly and sharing as much information as I can find. And with a great time now where there's a lot more around in the press around sobriety, and the conversation is more open now. So I'm really hoping that people are going to be more open talking generally about alcohol and their feelings about it. As I said before, we're recording this, so do feel free to turn off your screens if that's more comfortable for you. But before I get to a few slides, what I want to do is give you a little bit of background on me and my own drinking backstory. So my background includes a corporate career where I worked in senior learning and development roles and human resources roles, mainly in the technology sector. And I was running teams, looking after leadership, talent and organizational development across Europe. I also have a background in neuroscience. In fact, I'm a bit of a neuroscience nut. I really like everything about the brain. But I do also believe that we can all benefit from building some awareness about keeping our brains healthy and help it to work with us rather than against us. And throughout all of my career and most of my adult life, I drank. My support system consisted of Sauvignon Blanc, some Albarino. I thought it was really posh when I was drinking that. Pinot Grigio, Prosecco, of course, because we all like bubbles. Champagne when I was feeling really, flush. And the occasional sweet dessert wine as well. I like that as well. I drank through the highs and lows of family life, through career moves and promotions. I drank through the challenging issues at home, difficult work projects, and traveling. And I had a lovely life, and I drank through the whole lot. I drank to celebrate. I drank to mourn. I drank to socialize. It was just what I did. I was a high functioning, successful businesswoman. I was a wife, a mum, a daughter, sister, and friend. And the harder I worked, the more demand I put on myself. And the more that was expected of me at work and at home, the more I drank. Until one day in 2017, I realized that I was absolutely exhausted. I was fraught. I was a shadow of who I really was. And the crux of it was that I didn't like myself. I didn't like who I was becoming. And I was lying to myself about how much I was drinking and my ability to control it. And I was lying about other things too. I didn't like that at all. And so I stopped. And honestly now, nearly 6 years later, I truly believe that I'm one of the lucky ones, that I freed myself from the complexity of alcohol use and what I was doing, what I was using it for, if you like, to soothe and numb away. So I now I've taken all of my experience and my own lived experience of drinking to work with other midlife women to support them through their own journey to sobriety, if that's what they want to do, if that's going to work for them. But I will say it isn't just possible to quit the booze and enjoy an alcohol-free life. It really is brilliant. It's absolutely joyous. It's brilliant on the other side. But it does take work. It's messy. It's not a linear process, but I can assure you it is really insightful and it can be a really enjoyable journey if you trust the process and choose to embrace the ride. Now, in the spirit of transparency, at the end of this webinar, I am going to give a few minutes to sharing with you my group program, Sober Joy. That's what I call it, Sober Joy. I've tried and tested it throughout last year in 2022. I designed it in 2021. I tried and tested it with one-to-one clients. And what I'm now interested in doing is bringing it to the group space as well. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of detail around that at the end. But what I want to do is just share the screen now, if I may. This is the bit about webinars that really makes me very nervous. Anything to do with the tech. So, well, hey, I can see it so far. Let's say, yes, it's working. Can you all see that? I can see a few of you thumbs up. Brilliant. So what we're going to do is, here's the agenda. It's not working. Let's move it on. It is. Great. I'm going to start showing you the agenda. This is what I'm going to talk, and it's going to be less than half an hour, and then hopefully we can have a conversation. So I'm going to start by talking about really the escalation of drinking, and I guess the absolute acceptance and almost expectation of it in society as a social enhancer and a stress buster, why we believe it helps with stress. Then I'm going to move on to looking at how drinking alcohol as a stress reliever kind of turns the volume up on stress itself, and how we develop that craving for the buzz. Are we actually wanting the buzz of the stress so that we can have the buzz of the booze? And then I'm going to give you some suggestions to help regulate your nervous system instead of drinking in the face of stress, by replacing the buzz with healthier habits that will also give you that buzz. I'm going to outline some benefits, 10 benefits to giving yourself a breaking from drinking. Some of them you're going to know, like some of the health benefits, but it's up-to-date research, but others may be discussed less, so it could actually be a bit of a surprise to you. But I think it's really interesting to look at the benefits and all of them together. And finally, as I mentioned before, I'm going to close by telling you about my 3-month Sober Joy program if you want some support to get started. And if not, I'm going to give you some other tips as well. So please feel free to put any comments and questions in the chat. And you can also message Nikki, that's Nikki Mort, directly if you prefer. Nikki's helping me behind the scenes today. Thanks, Nikki. I'm going to stop halfway through for questions and, of course, at the end. And like I say, it's going to be no more than half an hour. So I think it's worth putting out there that we all start off in life as take it or leave it drinkers. You know, when we've never had it before and we have a little taste, you know, maybe our parents offered us a little nip of something. I know my mum did. It was Harvey's Bristol Cream when I was in the sixth form, or Croft Original. I would come home from school, yes, school, and have a little sherry with my mum. So, you know, maybe our parents offered us a sip of something, or maybe we had some peer pressure. I mean, that just abounds, doesn't it? To try something, to have a glug, or more than a glug, a shot. Or maybe we mistakenly even took a chocolate out of the box of liqueur chocolates at Christmas. But we all start off as take it or leave it drinkers. You know, we didn't know this stuff on the slide. We didn't know what feeling tipsy or lightheaded felt like. We didn't know what it felt like to be drunk. We didn't know about the buzz. We didn't know about the edges it blurred and the edge that it took off. We didn't know how it helped with anxiety. We didn't know about the downsides of the hangovers, or the lost sleep, or the remorse, or the shame. We learned that as we started to drink more. We learned that through repeated use. And when we learn that alcohol can help with stress, then we do it again. And our drinking can so easily escalate from that take it or leave it, or experimenting with a new taste, to something a little bit more. And that's so easy to do because alcohol isn't just acceptable, it's firmly enmeshed in society and in all of our lives. It's just what we do for lots and lots of reasons. You know, drinking has long been a way to bring people together in celebration and socializing. We toast monumental occasions like weddings and graduations. We commiserate the hard times over hard liquor. We throw massive parties when young people reach the legal drinking age. I did. I've got 3 of them, 3 very expensive, massive parties, you know, and alcohol is really entrenched in popular culture. And that can really lead to an unhealthy sort of, I guess, glorification and glamorization of, and it encourages people, and youngsters particularly, to drink. And this can then become quite dangerous. If you think about it, alcohol, it's all over the TV, it's on the soap operas, it's in songs, it's in movies, it's in adverts, it's everywhere. Now, I was looking for a birthday card for a friend the other day, and I counted 21 cards in a local supermarket. So it was my local Tesco Extra with headlines like this: May your birthday be filled with cake, deep cocktails, drunken texts, and poor decisions. I mean, yeah, alcohol related cards, they were more than half of the choice on the shelves for female birthdays. It's crazy. And the bottom line is that alcohol is so normalized in our society, so enmeshed at a subconscious level for many of us, it just feels normal and natural. And then we have a little bit of a message or a sense that maybe we're having a little bit too much ourselves. We look at other people and think, no, they drink more, so I'm okay. It's so normal to have colleagues and friends and family members who drink more than us as well. So I think that we all recognize that alcohol is firmly enmeshed in society and in our lives. It's just what we do. And it's also what we do when we want to take that edge off when we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed or stressed. Now, let's face it, stress is part of everyday life. It's all around us. Stress actually is a collective term for all sorts of things, all sorts of events and scenarios that we experience as human beings in a different way. So things like starting a new job, death in the family, moving home, a relationship breakup, or getting married. So happy and sad things. These are pretty big life changes. But also let's think about the day-to-day stresses of life, like having too much to do, that overwhelm, being late on the school run, opening the fridge in the morning and finding that there's no milk, you know, worrying about the bills. That's a really pertinent one for the moment as well. Worrying about missing a train, being shattered after a working day and you've commuted in and you get soaked on the way home. All sorts of things we get stressed about. Remember, we do have different perceptions. What is stressful for one person may be exciting for another, or not relevant at all to yet another person. Now, many people turn to alcohol in a response to stress. And while drinking may lead to some sort of buzz and positive feelings and relaxation in the short term, problems will come when stress is ongoing and people continue to try and deal with the stress with the booze. But I get it. I really do get it. Alcohol is a depressant and it numbs and switches everything off quickly because we're ingesting it. So it gets into our bloodstream really quickly. It gives us the effect that we want. But our brain does not know the difference between having something to give us that relief, that instant buzz, versus how rubbish that you may feel when you wake up at 4 a.m. And alcohol also starts to override the prefrontal cortex of the brain, that front part. That's the rational thinking part of the brain. And even one glass can switch that off almost entirely. So you're not going to be rationalizing at that point that a drink won't be helping with the stress. You're not thinking, oh, I'd better stop now because the stress is getting a bit worse. That ain't going to happen. You just want that relief, the buzz, or the calming effect. Different people are experience that numbing, that soothing, that buzzing in different ways. So how does this buzz or soothing work? Well, the star of the show is a neurotransmitter. Hang on a minute. Hasn't come up. The slide was supposed to be, if you can see at the top, the chemical formula of dopamine. Well, you know what? I think we're all going to be able to live without knowing the chemical formula. So think about this slide as saying dopamine. So it's the star of the show, dopamine is. I'm sure you've heard of dopamine. It's a complex neurotransmitter. I'm just going to explain it at a very high level because I think that when we're drinking, we want to do something about drinking. Understanding how it works is actually really useful. So it's a neurotransmitter. And what that means is that it's a chemical messenger. What it does is it carries signals between all your brain cells and it communicates information around the body. Your brain will use billions and billions and billions of neurotransmitters to manage everything in your body, from breathing to how your heartbeat, your blood pressure, and to your digestion. And dopamine is often labeled in sort of common parlance the happy neurotransmitter because it does raise sort of good positive vibe feelings. It's part of the brain's reward circuits, but I like to call it the motivation neurotransmitter. Because in the reward role, what it does is it helps to lay down habits and it makes them automatic. So if you think about it, if you like something like a glass of wine or a gin and tonic or a beer, you get a hit of dopamine, you're going to do it again. It feels rewarding. And so we're motivated to do it again and again. Now, while initially drinking will, in the first place, it'll boost your dopamine levels. It feels good. And then it kind of acts in a nice depressant way. It kind of calms us down, gives us a nice gentle buzz, maybe taking away some of that social anxiety. What happens over time, even if you're only drinking a glass a day, is that your brain adapts to this dopamine overload as you drink more. And it starts to then naturally produce less dopamine and reduce the actual number of dopamine receptors. And then as your levels of dopamine plummet over the months or the years, or in my case, over the decades, so does your mood. And you aren't getting that same reward from that 1 or 2 glasses of wine. So then you're trying to get the buzz even more. So you may reach for even more alcohol to try and boost your dopamine levels, try and get that spark back, that soothing, that buzz. And that happens at an unconscious level often. It's not deliberate. It really is. We're looking to get that joy of the dopamine hit. So it's really easy to see how easy it is to go from 1 glass of wine in an evening to a whole bottle. And that's where I was when I finally got to the stage where I had to give up. I was drinking a bottle of wine a night, and sometimes even starting at 5 o'clock, and sometimes even I would pour it into a mug, in an attempt to pretend that it wasn't a glass of wine. So, and it isn't just dopamine. When we drink, there are a whole load of other hormones and neurotransmitters that are unbalanced, and they're operating at either a heightened or a dampened level, depending on what their role is, all in the effort to try and bring you back to some sort of balance and leveling. Our bodies and our brains are absolutely wonderful things. They're always trying to bring us back to balance. So simply put, drinking messes with our brain chemistry. I mean, that's a very simple statement, but it's the reality of what alcohol does. And interestingly, there are some medications that can start to normalize dopamine levels in the brain. They're occasionally, not always, used with the treatment of alcohol addiction, so really severe addiction where somebody needs to go into formal medical rehab to be able to detox properly from the drug. So I'm pretty sure that someone like Amy Winehouse, we all know that was a very tragic story in the end, Amy Winehouse would have been on some of those meds that are all around trying to bring her naturally up to the normal dopamine levels. But the good news, and there really is good news here, is you don't need medication if you're not at the Amy Winehouse level of your potential drinking. Your brain chemistry, including your dopamine receptors, will gradually regenerate with good health and wellness practices. So like exercise, like healthy hydration, nutrition, yoga, and various activities. Now, normal, healthy dopamine production, it depends on lots of different factors, but many doctors and scientists believe that the brain's dopamine production, it will return to pre-alcohol levels after around about 3 months, maybe a bit longer with somebody like me who had been drinking for decades, but 3 months of taking a break to get to normal production of non-medicalized, without a medical intervention, dopamine level through putting some really good practices into your life is great news. So this is good news. I really do think it is. So for you, maybe one of the takeaways maybe today is about finding other ways to get the buzz or get yourself soothed and calm and grounded without the alcohol, with healthy dopamine substitutes. A lot of these are so readily available to us, and they're not rocket science. The thing is, they're not quick wins because we're not ingesting them. So things like exercise, like walking, breathing, breath work, meditation, and sometimes a bit of thrill seeking, exciting adventures, that can give you a real kick of dopamine. Doing new things, novelty, traveling, whatever floats your boat. And it's about asking yourself, what is it that I love doing? When am I really in flow and enjoy myself? How can I bring my natural dopamine receptors back to life? Now, as I just mentioned before, these activities don't give you an immediate spurt or squirt, I mean, that's horrible words, those aren't they, of dopamine that ingesting something like sugar or smoking or a bit of cannabis can. But with practice and consistency, if you practice them regularly, and those of you who partake of yoga, I know Fiona does, she's a yoga instructor, you'll know that with practice, that these can bring some rapid, massive changes into your life, and you can feel really grounded and centered. And part of the reason you're doing that is you're coming back to the center, but your dopamine receptors are beginning to work again. So let's move on to other benefits of taking a break. And some of these you may know already, but taken together, they are actually pretty compelling. I'm going to talk really quickly about 10 of them. But before I do that, can I just check, Nikki, is there anything in the chat that question-wise? And if not, we'll just move on and we can have a chat at the end.
There's a few comments from Victoria in there.
Okay, do you want to read them to me? Or do you want me to go in?
I can't get to the chat at the moment.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. So I can see them now. What I'm really terrified about when I do this is that if I press the cross, we all go off. Okay. So Victoria, my ADHD means I have a dopamine deficiency. So as sufferers often, ADD sufferers often have problems with lack of motivation and chronic procrastination. Absolutely, Victoria. So that's really interesting. I'd be interested in your perspective as to what you do to naturally boost those, if you're happy to talk about that at the end. And I love your next comment. I've been sober for a month since watching your last webinar. I'm thrilled for you, Victoria. Well done, you. Don't forget what a big deal that is. Really, please don't forget that. Well done. And, just after the festive season, that's just fantastic. Yeah, so the 3 months or longer. Yeah. So do you want to come on now and talk about it? Oh, you don't need to at all, Victoria. Or do you want to just chat at the end, maybe?
No, I can talk now quickly. It's better.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you.
My little kids suddenly ruin the end of the webinar. No, I didn't realize how much I would struggle with it because of the ADHD, because I was only diagnosed like a year ago. So I didn't realize what was wrong with me before, like why it was so difficult for me and nobody, like everybody else, could control themselves more easily,
Yes.
So you have to be careful. It's the same with shopping or, my mum doesn't drink too much, but she's addicted to shopping.
Yeah.
And so she thinks it's fine because it's not a drug, but it can get dangerous.
It can, can't it?
Yeah. Men go for gambling more often than shopping. It's all the different addictions that you don't always think about.
It's really, interesting.
So I've managed to go sober for a month, not touched a drop, and it's really not been difficult at all. I expected it to be awful, absolutely awful. I don't know how. I don't get the I thought I would have terrible cravings and be really, really like jittery, and I just felt really, really good. But I watched your webinar and then I watched the dry January tips of how to keep going. I didn't do it because of dry January, but yeah, so that's been really, really helpful to have this sense of community as well. But it's I'm taking ADHD meds, so I don't know if that helps. You mentioned the medication that addicts take. It could be very similar to the stimulation meds.
Yes,
raise the dopamine levels laterally to a normal level.
I wonder if it's also potentially, and I don't know the answer, if it's also potentially about serotonin as well, another neurotransmitter, which is more of, that's commonly known as the love drug, the love neurotransmitter.
So I don't know what part of it is me and what part of it is the antidepressants and the ADHD meds, but it's working anyway.
Well, that's wonderful.
It doesn't matter, does it?
That's wonderful.
I can worry about coming off those in the future, but this is the most important thing now. So step by step. So I've been trying to not replace wine or vodka with cake with varying success, but at this stage anything is better than alcohol. It's not another drug, But I do have to be careful with the food, make sure I don't just turn it into another coping mechanism and not actually deal with. So I started doing this week. Have you heard of it?
Oh my goodness, dialectical behavior therapy skills workbook. That rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know,
So
it's really difficult to say. That's why I thought I'd hold up the book instead of and I'm doing it with my therapist, my it's like CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's very
superb.
similar. So it's like they talk about everything you talk about, but like it's really very similar to everything you say, but it's like a really good workbook where you have to fill in every single thing you're going to do every time you get a craving. Like, what are you going to do the second you get a craving? What are you going to have a plan? That's fantastic.
Oh, I'm really
It's very
pleased.
similar
Well,
advice to yours, obviously, because you love the neuroscience, but it's my therapist suggested it because it's a book that
oh,
I have to
thank you for
write in.
suggesting. Would you
Because I'm
mind
terrible
typing
at
that in the
reading
chat?
everything, learning everything, understanding everything, and then not actually implementing it.
And this makes you implement
It
it. Would you mind
does.
popping that to the chat?
Yeah,
That
I'll
would be
put a
really
link.
useful for
Yeah.
people. That would be great. Thank you. And if I may, a slight aside. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing. And a slight aside, we're not talking about this today. Maybe we can talk about it at the end. But if you're interested in reading about the cross addictions, which is what you, Victoria, was referring to, William Porter's book talks about that. I think it's called Alcohol Explained. And then the guy clearly wasn't in marketing because his sequel is called Alcohol Explained 2.
Yeah.
That he's not a brand expert, bless him. But he talks about these cross addictions. And I did a talk this week as well about sugar. Sugar is an extraordinary cross addiction for people who quit the booze because alcohol is so full of it. If anybody had asked me, when I was drinking, what my snack preference was, it would always have been crisps or nuts. Then when I stopped, my goodness. And I think it's really hardcore if you quit the booze to then, also quit the sugar at the same time. But also what you mentioned about your mum, and it's those behavioral ones as well that we move to. The sugar's very common. Retail therapy is, and things we also find is we have so much time. Gambling, gaming, there's sex, there's all sorts of stuff that people shift their need for repetition to. But all of those are dopamine boosting. All of them are, so thank you. Appreciate that. So let's now talk about some of the other benefits. If you pop that in the chat, I'd be really grateful. That's fantastic. So, is it going to allow me to move on now? Yes. So we've talked about number one, about how the benefits of taking a break. You can absolutely recalibrate your brain chemistry. And not just the dopamine, but the several others, like I mentioned serotonin when we were talking to Victoria before, but also GABA and acetylcholine. There are various ones. We can't go into detail really now. The second benefit is this wonderful thing. Ruth Watkins is on the call as well, and she's an absolute sleep expert and coach. So it's really interesting, this thing about improved sleep. I think I missed a D off there. Never mind. Now, while drinking might help you fall asleep, so, insomniacs tend to sort of, let's just have a drink, I'll have a whiskey and I'll be off. It may very well be true. What it does is it puts you into deep sleep, but it suppresses your REM sleep. That's the rapid eye movement sleep, which is that's the restorative bit. It's when your brain consolidates its memories. It's also the dreaming state. And we do need to have that REM sleep to consolidate memories, but also to process negative thoughts. So if we're not having the REM sleep, then we're kind of waking up in the morning without having done all that sort of dumping and that kind of processing. Also remember that alcohol is a diuretic. So both of those, the lack of REM and the diuretic, will mean that we're probably going to wake up in the night and need to go to the loo and therefore feel less rested. Now, for some people, it takes a while when they take a break from alcohol for the sleep to improve. Sadly, it isn't always immediate, and it certainly wasn't for me. Sometimes actually also interestingly, people experience really colourful dreams and nightmares in the early days of quitting for good. And that's about the REM sleep coming back to life, almost super heightened. The next one is that your liver regenerates. Hurrah! The liver's an amazing organ. It doesn't happen in a day, but for anyone who drinks more than 2 drinks a day, you will have fatty deposits, fatty changes in your liver. Does that sound horrible? But when you stop drinking, those fatty changes are reversible. The liver can become normal again within a few weeks. Clearly, it depends on how much you were drinking, whether you were drinking a bottle of vodka, for instance. That's probably going to be doing more harm and laying down more fatty deposits than a couple of beers a day, for instance. But the great news is that when you take the alcohol away, the liver can then focus on its other jobs, such as breaking down other toxins, what it was put in the body to do, metabolizing fats and excess hormones that have to be broken down. And what happens, and particularly for women who are in the menopausal or perimenopausal stage, if it's working all the time to get rid of the alcohol, all the time, then it's not helping your hormone and your estrogen and your progesterone as well. Next one. Reducing risk of some cardiovascular diseases and cancers, and heart diseases. Now, drinking can lead to high blood pressure. We've known that for some time, actually. It can also lead to heart failure and strokes. It contributes to something called cardiomyopathy, which is something around the muscles of the heart. So it's a disorder that affects the muscles of the heart. And we now know, and increasingly we're learning more and more about this, it's linked to a number of cancers, including the mouth cancer. Well, that's not really a surprise because we're ingesting it through the mouth, throat, liver cancer, esophageal cancer, which is often a really challenging one, and breast cancers. Great news is that taking a break or quitting permanently, it reduces your chances of these conditions. It's not absolutely causal, it isn't, the only sole factor, we know that, but, it's a one way of helping your chances. Number 5 is better mental health. And so this is also linked to the brain chemistry, and the sleep as well. So it's not entirely mutually exclusive as a benefit. But when we drink alcohol, the body will produce, we know, these elevated levels of endorphins and dopamine. And as the alcohol leaves our body, all those feel-good, buzzy things that we have in our body, those chemicals, they're depleted, and the stress hormones are also released, which leads to fluctuations in our mood. So we get more cortisol as well in our bodies. And this means if we're already feeling anxious or a little bit low, drinking can make our symptoms worse. And if you're feeling stressed by day-to-day events, that reduction in your brain's kind of baseline chemicals can make those stresses just feel even worse. So we can also kind of like exaggerate them as well, which is a real challenge. And that might make it harder to get through the day. And you may actually find, even when there's nothing majorly challenging going on, you're still finding it hard to get through the day. And you also might find that you start to lose interest. You get demotivated in things that usually would make you happy. So if we quit drinking, our bodies will come back to that balance. I think I remember doing GCSE biology revision with my kids. So homeostasis, bodies will come back to that homeostasis over time, and then we can start to find pleasure in day-to-day activities again. The rider on all of this, though, is you must pay attention to the basics of wellness, like good hydration, good nutrition, exercise, and sleep. So, when you're wanting to improve your mental health, it isn't just about stopping the drink. You really need to pay attention to the others in the area as well. Quick one here, you'll experience better skin. Who wouldn't want that? Alcohol, I mentioned before, it's a diuretic. It dehydrates the body and it can contribute to dry skin and premature aging. So bring it on. Number 7, you will save money. I mean, one of the things I suggest to my clients is to just be really honest with themselves about how much money they're spending on their drink per month, because then it can really tot up to quite a big amount. Then take the cash out for the month ahead when they're giving up, keep it visible in front of them for the whole month. And at the end of the month, go and do something fantastic or buy something fantastic. Now, mine in the first month I gave up was just below £300. So I took the family out for a slap up meal. It's absolutely fantastic. And the app I use now, apps don't work for everyone, but I use it to count the calories and the money. So the app that I use now says that I'm at £19,500 saving since I quit. I will put a rider on that. It's not a saving because it's just not spent on alcohol, because it hasn't been saved. I've been buying lots of things, particularly some of the accessories that Ruth, the sleep coach, also sells on the side. Spent quite a bit of money with you over the years, haven't I, Ruth? And I don't think many people think about this next one, this 8th one, but it's a huge benefit. This really one of my reasons, one of my whys. You're fully present. So I think it's really interesting that alcohol adverts, they promote booze as a way to connect with other people. In my experience, drinking tends to make us less connected. You might be physically present, but mentally it can be a whole different story. So when alcohol steals our focus, we miss the subtler stuff, those special moments that makes life what it is. I think we get shortchanged on memories if we're drinking. And it doesn't matter how many photographs you take of a special occasion, nothing is going to be as good as being able to remember it yourself. The next one is having more options. And when you're sober, it's fairly obvious you can drive yourself home from a night out. You can pick a restaurant based on food rather than on the wine menu. You can give your partner your full attention rather than keeping one eye on the bottle and, oh, do I order another one or not? You can stay out late and still get stuff done the next day. That's a game changer for work because you're not hungover. And it's really interesting when we talk about sobriety, we tend to focus solely on the thing that's been taken away rather than the benefits, these amazing benefits you see here on the slide of quitting drinking. Removing alcohol from the picture, what we're really doing is creating space for lots and lots and lots of different options and choices in our life. And the final benefit, and it's my biggest benefit, is the mornings are just wonderful. And it sounds obvious, but without a hangover, you get so much time back in the day. You may notice, you really notice that in the morning. Honestly, it never gets old to marvel at starting the day feeling great. Having more time is probably the biggest surprise to my clients, and it's a really delightful and lovely surprise. So, if you're keen to reap these benefits, and there are loads more, this is just a starter for 10. We don't have time to discuss them this evening. How would you get started? So here are some ideas. I'll quickly rattle through them. We get started. Rocket science, they're kind of quite sensible. So firstly, write down why, your why. Really knowing why you want to stop will help you stay on track. It's worth spending some time on this and doing some deep thinking and writing and journaling about it to get really clear. Is it because you want to improve your health, to sleep better, to be really present for your kids, to be more productive at work? My why, as I said up front, was to like myself again and to show up in life as an honest person. And to be honest, it was quite hard work to actually get to the point of writing that down and admitting that to myself. But when I knew it, I kept coming back to it as a motivator for helping me on my sobriety journey, and it really helped. The next one is telling other people. So tell your family and friends that you're aiming to have a break, or you don't need to say quit drinking forever. That might not even be in your mind. But explain why you want to do it. That way, you can share your successes with them. They can cheerlead you, and they'll understand when you've started turning down drinks or trips to the pub. So keep reminding them. When you frequently do that, it can help you to stay on track. Actually, may even encourage other people to join you. My husband joined me for the first 4 months until we went on holiday. I gave up in the March, and until we went on holiday, he joined me. And I have to say that was really supportive. The next one is have a plan. The joy of planning. So it's about avoiding temptations. And I would say in the early stages, it depends for you, it's individual. It's a good idea to avoid situations where you may be tempted to drink. So it might be about opting out of your weekly pub quiz if that floats your boat for a while. Or if you tend to drink in a restaurant when eating out, try going to restaurants that don't sell alcohol, or get earlier, or simply volunteer to drive. It's really important to identify your triggers. So by that, I kind of mean situations or places when you're really tempted to drink. That's important. That's part of your planning. Obviously, avoiding the pub or the wine bar is an obvious one, but also remember to think about where alcohol is situated at home. Maybe if you're going to the supermarket, write a shopping list. I know it sounds so basic, but if you don't have Pinot Grigio written as an item on it, it won't necessarily be quite as tempting to go and buy them. And avoid the alcohol aisles. Avoid them. And try something new. So try to identify those times, those trigger times for you when you usually drink. Fill the gap with something else. So would you normally head to the wine bar, say on a Friday? perhaps you can meet at the cinema instead. Or if you tend to drink in front of the TV after work, do something active instead. It doesn't have to be a marathon or even a couch to 5K. It could be just, getting active with something 50 from a YouTube channel or something, but just try something new. You could develop a real love for something new. And maybe it's about getting healthier. So why not fill that gap at your trigger time with a regular exercise class? You don't even need to leave your living room. You can actually get anywhere, or get any exercise on Zoom. One of the things I encourage my clients to do, though, is keep their trainers at the door. Again, it's not about running, but just if they need to put some distance between themselves and the trigger, put your trainers on or your wellies, depending on the weather, go out. Make it easy for yourself to just put some distance for yourself between any problems. And the last one I want to mention is rewarding yourself. Because, and I'm going to say, pick you out here, Victoria, well done you. Drinking alcohol and stopping drinking it is a huge positive change. And like any big change, there may be times when it doesn't feel easy. So it really is important to reward yourself as you make progress. And don't be hard on yourself if you have a slip up. Sometimes we need to go backwards to go forward again. And an easy way to keep track is to give yourself some short-term goals. Perhaps you're going to aim, first of all, for an alcohol-free week, then maybe an alcohol-free month, maybe then an alcohol-free 3 months. That's difficult to say, 3 months. And also the cost. So, technically rewarding yourself with that money you've saved, going out for a meal or planning a treat with the money you save. So I echo that again. Draw it out of the bank and then treat yourself at the end of it. So that's a few ideas to get you started if you want to have a break. But I'm going to just, as I mentioned up front, just close by talking about my program that I've designed. I've already developed and delivered with a number of one-to-one clients that I'm bringing into the group arena now. So it's called Sober Joy. It's a 12-week coaching program, and it starts on the 27th of February. Each week has a different theme, so really a topic, and you'll receive some video content, some handouts, and some exercises to complete before the group coaching session. And the themes build on each other week by week, and at the end of the 12 weeks, you'll have built so many insights about yourself into your alcohol story, and you'll have put it firmly in the past. So here are the themes and the topics. This is the 12. You can see the sort of topics that we actually run through. And these have been brought together because they are themes and topics that are brought up when I didn't actually have a program for both myself, but also for other clients. It's really useful to talk about your why, your purpose, your beliefs. How self-aware are you? What are your strengths? How can you bring your strengths into play? How do you nourish yourself? What does self-care mean to you? Let's talk about boundaries. And in that, there's also the topic of people pleasing, because so oftentimes we will just please others and say yes to a drink, not to upset them. We talk about keeping going in your resilience. Acceptance is about shame, and it's about forgiveness work as well. And then what next steps are going to be? What's next for you after these 12 weeks? Is it a lifetime of sobriety, or is it, actually, I'll try another 3 months? Nobody uses the forever word. It doesn't need to be said at all. But here's what I want to really explain to you that makes Sober Joy, my program, different. I work both in, I guess what I can't think of another word other than the classic coaching style. So I've been a qualified coach for more than 20 years. It's all about working with your mindset and asking questions for you to reflect upon, take some action around, and to be resourceful around and consider your progress and your change in your alcohol-free life. But I also am a somatic coach as well. I work at the somatic body level. I'm somatically trained, and that's about helping you to regulate your brain chemistry and your nervous system. So what that means is that I can help you to work on those healthy dopamine alternatives I talked about before, and help you to manage cravings and triggers through giving you different resources to try. And some of them, they will keep you in the moment. They'll help you feel safe. They'll help you feel grounded. They'll help you feel centered. They'll help you feel oriented. These are things like simple breathing exercises, grounding and oriented scripts, movement sequences, and they're all designed to help you calm your nervous system and contribute to your brain chemistry becoming more balanced so you have more natural energy, focus, and a sense of control. Now, even though I have a background in neuroscience and I had an understanding of how the nervous system worked, I didn't do anything to feel present when I was drinking. I used to roll my eyes when anybody mentioned yoga or meditation. So I've got that all that woo-woo stuff. That was me. I can see Fiona laughing. There is real science and proof behind the benefits of these and many other activities that I now use every day to continue to support myself and stay present for both myself, my family, and my clients. So you may be asking, why is this a magic combination? Why is that combination of classic coaching and somatic coaching? Why does that matter? So here's the thing, you think about it. You can spend time focusing on, say, let's talk about beliefs. That was on the list of the 12 topics. You can spend a lot of time focusing on your beliefs around alcohol. But if your body and brain are in a hypervigilant state, you're not giving yourself the best chance to deal with triggers and start to ground and work through those beliefs, those new beliefs properly. And the other way around, if you're feeling really calm and grounded and settled and regulated, and yet you don't do the work around your boundaries or your beliefs or acceptance of your past, then you're not going to be aligned in your thinking when taking a break from the alcohol. It's going to feel really incongruent and really hard. So doing both together brings it all together and gives you the best chance of success, and you'll feel brilliant as a result as well. So here's the practical details. What you get. So it starts on the 27th, as I mentioned before. You get weekly content and exercises, weekly Zoom coaching. At the moment, it's on Wednesday evenings, an onboarding group session, 2 private coaching calls with me to be taken up to 6 months after the program. And that's about helping you on your next steps. Maybe that is sustainable sobriety. Maybe it's another 3 months or another 6 months for you. Access to a support community. Now, I run my work on a platform called Kajabi, not on Facebook, so it's absolutely secure and it's absolutely private. There's many additional materials that I've got around topics like managing emotions, navigating relationships, alcohol-free, tips for socializing. I actually had a client the other day who says, I really want to talk about sober intimacy. So that's something I will work on. I'm going to try and get a relationship coach to work with me around that. So all sorts of different topics. I'm building these materials and resources all the time. So I think there's about 8 hours of online content, what I call a life book of reflections and exercises. I'm actually going to have to accredit that to one of my clients. And he said to me, this is like a life book. And I'm going to take that. 12 hours of group coaching and an hour of one-to-one work as well. And the cost for this is just $997. And I'm keeping it low at this time because it's the first time I've ever run it in a group. So I just felt that that was the fairest way to do it. And I'm also keeping just for ease, and that's inclusive of VAT. So that's what you get. And I just want to close by saying thank you for giving me your time on a Thursday evening. And I also want to say this out loud. I love this. It's so true. Nobody ever regrets choosing not to drink, and nobody ever regrets taking a break from alcohol.